The MBTA commuter rail serves as a vital transportation network for thousands of commuters in Massachusetts, connecting the suburbs to downtown Boston. In recent years, however, the system has faced a myriad of challenges, ranging from aging infrastructure to frequent delays and budget issues. These problems have led to a decline in ridership, funding, and overall quality of service, and now is the time to change that. Today, we'll be taking a deep dive into the MBTA commuter rail and talk about what needs to be done in order to fix it. Let's start by looking at a system map. The MBTA uses a pretty standard North American commuter rail layout with 12 lines radiating out of one downtown area, in this case Boston. Seems normal enough at first, but if you take a closer look, you can see that there's no proper Boston station, rather a North and South station with no direct connection. With the 4 former Boston and Main lines operating out of North Station, and the 8 former New Haven and New York Central lines operating out of South Station, the entire commuter rail is effectively turned into 2 systems with a complicated transfer between them. Say for example you live in Salem and you're taking an Amtrak train to New York. Well, you would expect this to consist of a simple transfer at one station, since commuter trains from Salem only go to North Station, and Amtrak trains to New York only depart from South Station. You would have to lug your belongings onto the Orange Line at North Station, ride 7 minutes to Downtown Crossing, transfer to the Red Line for a 2-minute ride to South Station, and then finally make your way onto your Amtrak train. This added hassle makes it a lot easier to justify driving to South Station, putting more cars on the road, and contributing to infamously brutal I-93 traffic. How exactly could this issue be fixed? Well, as outlandish as it sounds, a massive tunnel could be built underneath downtown Boston. Believe it or not, in the late 90s and early 2000s, this is almost what happened. The Big Dig was a highway mega project that, among other things, moved the elevated Central Artery Highway into underground tunnels in hopes of reducing motor vehicle traffic and noise pollution in downtown Boston. Originally included in the Big Dig were plans to build a north-south rail link along the new I-93 tunnel, but as the project progressed, the state government not only canceled the north-south rail link, but actually transferred project debt to the MBTA. Additionally, MassDOT forced the MBTA to spend money on building new stations to combat I-93 traffic, and the agency is still in debt to this day. Ironically, thanks to the induced demand created by the bigger highway, there are now more cars than ever on 93. If some of these funds had been used to build the north-south rail link, there would actually be less congestion, and at least the MBTA would be getting something out of its debt. The state's mismanagement of money exposes a core issue with the MBTA, a lack of funding. Like pretty much every North American commuter rail, the MBTA is given way too little money to operate its services, let alone to maintain or improve them. Though Massachusetts is one of the most progressive, pro-transit places in the country, its state government has always seemed to turn a blind eye to the MBTA and even impede it with $4 billion in Big Dig-related debt. To this day, the MBTA is hemorrhaging money trying to keep its trains and buses moving and is projected to still be paying for Big Dig mitigation until the 2040s. Obviously, the state should be giving the MBTA more money, and so should it be applying for as many federal grants as possible, but legislators should consider that public transit is not supposed to make money. Americans are quick to point out that public transportation almost never turns a profit, but they fail to consider that the same applies to almost all public roadways, and that's completely fine. Public transit, as implied by its name, is a public service and provides value through positive externalities such as an enhanced degree of mobility for people, less traffic on the road, and a cleaner local environment. If the people in control of funding the MBTA better understood this concept, it would be a whole lot easier for it to receive funding not only to operate as it currently does, but to attract new riders with service improvements such as the North-South Rail Link. Plenty of people dread the idea of having to drive into Boston, but since the commuter rail is so unreliable and inconvenient sometimes, they drive anyway. If the MBTA was able to improve its services to the point where these people started using it, it would take cars off the road, make a little more money through fares, and show politicians that it's worth investing even more into. There are a few more ways that the MBTA could upgrade the commuter rail, both improving things for its current riders and attracting new ones. As I mentioned before, the North-South Rail Link would be a game changer for mobility within the city of Boston, but there are a few other improvements that the MBTA is in desperate need of. First off, the commuter rail really should be electrified. While there are certainly a few lines that don't have the ridership nor frequency to support electrification, some could really benefit from it. First off is the most obvious choice, the Providence-Stoughton line. The Providence-Stoughton line, namely the Boston to Wickford Junction section, operates entirely over the Amtrak Northeast Corridor, which is already electrified. That's right, the MBTA has been operating diesel trains on an electrified line for more than 20 years, and to make things worse, the Providence line has the highest ridership of any MBTA commuter rail line. All that would have to be done in order for the MBTA to start operating electric trains on the Providence line would be to put up a few miles of wires in Rhode Island, electrifying the station tracks at TF Green Airport and Wickford Junction, and for the MBTA to actually purchase electric locomotives. Not only would this make Providence line trains faster and better for the environment, but it would give the MBTA a better public image as a clean mode of transportation. If that wasn't enough reason to begin electrifying, there's the case of Back Bay, the third busiest station on the network. This mostly underground station is infamous for its terrible air quality thanks to diesel commuter trains. To make matters worse, it serves the Framingham-Worcester, Providence-Stoughton, Franklin, and Needham lines, some of which are the busiest on the system. If the MBTA was electrified, Back Bay would become much less of a health hazard, in addition to not being covered in diesel exhaust soot. So should the MBTA electrify its entire network? In an ideal world, yes, but realistically, that's probably not going to happen anytime soon. If the MBTA were to begin the process of going electric, I'd say to start by electrifying the Providence-Stoughton line. The infrastructure is almost entirely there already, it's the busiest line on the system, and it would be the easiest one to electrify. This relatively, and I strongly emphasize relatively, affordable project, if done well, would get people in support of electrification and make the process of upgrading other lines easier. After the Providence line, I'd say the MBTA should start going down the list of its busiest lines and partially electrify their busiest sections. I'd say electrify the Newburyport-Rockport line from Boston to Beverly, the Framingham-Worcester line from Boston to Framingham, the Franklin line from Boston to Walpole, and the Lowell line all the way to the end of the line since it's so short. Though the MBTA doesn't currently have any official plans to electrify yet, over the past few years, politicians and transit planners have talked about electrification and similarly have recommended partial electrification like I did. Unfortunately, where my ideas and the state's ideas differ are the specific modes of electrification. While I think traditional overhead wire electrification is the most ideal option, the MBTA has suggested electrifying tracks for just a few miles at a time and using battery electric trains that charge while under the wires. Obviously, if you're a fan of the channel, you know that I think battery electric trains are an unproven, unreliable, and impractical technology. I think the best option for the MBTA is using dual-mode locomotives, such as the ALP45DP, as seen on New Jersey Transit, or an overhead electric version of the SC42DM currently being built for Metro North. These engines would be capable of operating in diesel mode on non-electrified lines, while being able to seamlessly transition to electric when operating under wires. Unlike battery electric locomotives, dual-mode diesels have existed for well over 60 years and have been refined to the point where they are just as reliable as traditional locomotives. Speaking of new locomotives, the MBTA hasn't seen a single new engine in almost a decade. The MBTA has a fleet of around 100 locomotives with an average age of 29 years old. The MBTA's newest engines, the HSP-46s, were built between 2013 and 2014. Aside from initial mechanical issues when they were first delivered, the MBTA's 40 HSPs are a reliable backbone of the fleet and are also its cleanest engines, being compliant with the EPA's Tier 3 diesel emissions standards. Aside from the HSP-46s, the MBTA only owns two other modern locomotives, those being a duo of Motive Power MP36PH-3Cs, acquired as surplus from Utah's Frontrunner in 2009. These two are currently receiving midlife overhauls by Wabtec and will most likely return late this year. Now for the fun part. The remaining 62 locomotives on the MBTA's fleet are between 30 and 50 years old. For context, the average service life of a passenger locomotive in America is 25 to 30 years. 37 of the MBTA's vintage engines are F40-based locomotives built between 1987 and 1991. The MBTA's F40s are so old that they've been rebuilt multiple times, once in the early 2000s and once again in the 2020s. Classified as F40PH-3Cs nowadays, these MBTA veterans are another backbone of the fleet, and thanks to their recent overhaul are still pretty reliable. That's not to say they're perfect though, as these engines are significantly worse for the environment than the modern diesels, and despite their recent overhaul are still near the end of their useful service lives. Speaking of at the end of their useful service lives, the MBTA operates 25 GP40MC locomotives, which at this point are pushing 50. Originally built as GP40-2LW freight locomotives between 1973 and 1975, the Jeeps are by far the oldest engines on the MBTA and are still in regular service on the north side. While some of these engines are being rebuilt and placed into non-revenue service, the remaining units in passenger service are quite literally falling apart and with no new engines on order currently, will continue to fall apart for the foreseeable future. The MBTA's F40s and GP40s are just another sign of the severe lack of funding for the system, as the railroad is forced to continuously overhaul engines in place of ordering new ones. While rebuilding is better than nothing, it's not intended to be a long-term solution for equipment, but rather just a temporary measure to keep trains moving while new equipment is on order. Unfortunately, until new locomotives are ordered, the commuter rail's older engines will continue to deteriorate and cause issues. While a fleet of aging locomotives can definitely impede commuters when they break down, most of the time when they're operating normally, commuters won't notice a thing. What they will notice, however, are aging railcars. Unfortunately, the MBTA is no stranger to these either, with an average passenger car age of 26 years old. Unlike most commuter rails in the United States, the MBTA still operates single-level cars, some of which were built as early as 1978. This is particularly common on the north side, where trains typically consist of mostly single-level cars, with one or two newer bi-levels per train. Luckily, the aging railcar situation is slowly improving, as the MBTA is currently receiving 80 new bi-level cars built by Hyundai Rotem that will allow for the south side to be entirely double-decker trains. The MBTA also has an order for up to 220 more of these cars that was placed on hold in 2020. If this order is finalized, however, the MBTA will be able to finally retire all of its single-level cars, both standardizing trains system-wide and optimizing the system for commuters, with power outlets and bathrooms in every car. Right now it's clear that the MBTA is in desperate need of change, and as a rail fan, I took it upon myself to create a plan for how and when the MBTA should order new locomotives and railcars, allowing it to modernize its trains over the next decade or so. Right now, I think the MBTA should be focusing on three things for the commuter rail: electrification, the retirement and replacement of single-level railcars, and the retirement and replacement of older diesel locomotives. First off, the MBTA should electrify the Providence line. If they began right now, the Providence line could probably be done by the 2030s because the entire project would consist of installing less than 10 miles of catenary in Rhode Island and negotiating operations with Amtrak. Around when Providence line electrification gets underway, the MBTA should order 20 to 30 dual-mode locomotives that would not only operate on the newly electrified line, but allow for the long overdue replacement of the GP40 MCs. Separate from electrifying, the MBTA should reinstate the Hyundai Rotem order from 2020 and start replacing remaining single-level cars. If the MBTA placed this order right now, I think they could have an entirely double-decker fleet by the early 2030s. Finally, long-term, the MBTA should partially electrify its busiest lines, which I mentioned earlier, and order more dual-mode locomotives to replace the F40s. In my plan, the HSP-46s would stick around longer and operate on non-electrified lines such as the Fitchburg, Old Colony, and South Coast lines, and the two MP-36s would be assigned to seasonal Cape Flyer service. Obviously, this is a purely hypothetical situation, and nothing I've mentioned, short of the single-level car replacement, seems to be planned currently, but I hope this paints a picture of what the commuter rail could look like in the future if we began to invest in it now. Massachusetts is a great place to live, and it deserves good public transit. The MBTA has a lot of things that make it great, and a lot of exciting things to look forward to. It's actively trying to improve its system, envisioning a future regional rail model that could potentially be electrified. It's in the process of building one of the biggest commuter rail expansions in the country with its South Coast Rail project, and it's also looking at options to expand to Western Mass with the East-West Rail project. The commuter rail truly is an asset to the state, and if it received the funding that it desperately needs, it could become one of the best regional rail systems in the country. So if you live in Massachusetts, or New England for that matter, send this to your local representatives and show them that we deserve better. Hey there, thanks for watching. I know this is kind of a different type of video than I usually make, and I know some of my recommendations for how to improve the commuter rail are pretty outlandish considering how poorly funded it currently is. I know right now it seems like a lot, but I really do think that with enough investment in the right things, the MBTA could make a complete 180. Right now it seems like the MBTA is at an all-time low, especially in the case of the rapid transit lines. But the more that I hear about other American projects such as East Side Access and Penn Station Access in New York, CalMod in Northern California, and everything Amtrak has planned for the next few decades, the more I feel like the MBTA has a real shot at changing things. I hope this video was informative, and if you enjoyed it, let me know because it was fun to make. I'd love to make similar videos talking about other cities and even other local things such as how bad the MBTA subways are right now. Once again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon in another video.